I woke under a ceiling I didn't recognize, the world reduced to white tiles and the soft blink-blink of monitors. My chest felt like a barn door rehinged by stubborn men, the ache deep and honest. Anesthesia wrapped my thoughts in thick cotton. Through it, a nurse's voice threaded in. "Good morning, Mr. Harland," she said gently. "You did great. Triple bypass held beautifully. We'll have you walking by noon." "Walking," I said, or tried to. The word sounded like it belonged to someone else. I was too tired to be brave, too awake to pretend I wasn't afraid. The kind of fear that doesn't lunge, just sits beside you and breathes. Her name tag read, Jasmine L. RN. Her eyes had the calm you earn by standing in chaos and not letting it pull you under. She adjusted the 4 with one hand and my blanket with the other. "Doctor says we'll discharge you tomorrow if your numbers keep looking this good." "Tomorrow?" I repeated. "Your family coming?" Jasmine asked, like it was a sure thing. "In most lives, it is." I glanced at my phone in the plastic tray. The time glowed green like a small mercy. 11:07 a.m.? I wouldn't need them today. Taxis exist. But the word family carried a weight my sternum couldn't bear. "I'll text them," I said. She smiled. "I'll be back with your meds." She left me with the beep and the hush. Two companions that demand you tell the truth to yourself. I've always been a simple man in the ways that matter. Navy for 24 years out of Annapolis. 2 deployments that rattled my bones and taught me to fold a shirt so sharp it could cut a bad habit in half. It kept storms inside until I could aim them. My wife Maggie died 6 summers ago. Was a woman who made a home out of a paycheck and a pot of beans, and the uncanny ability to know when to laugh and when to shut a door. After she was gone, I did what a lot of men do. I got small. I ate standing up. I talked to the television. The house felt like a museum of a life I no longer had permission to touch. When my son Daniel asked if he and his wife wanted to take over the place, it sounded like a solution, not a surrender. "Live with us, Dad," he'd said. "We'll be a family again." I signed the deed. I told myself it was practical. I kept a life estate clause because the Navy lawyer told me never to walk off a cliff without a rope tied to something. But a clause isn't a conversation. Time. My wedding photos disappeared from the mantle, replaced by scented candles that smelled like intangible nouns. Claire called them serenity and breeze. She didn't need candles to make me feel invisible. She was good at that without props. I picked up the phone with a hand that still shook sometimes, never in combat. Always in quiet rooms. The family chat held years of our lives. Rebecca sending pictures from Portland hiking boots, coffee cups, sunlight on water. Daniel's requests for passwords and checks. Claire's party planning, all curated cheer. I typed, "Who can pick me up from the hospital tomorrow?" I watched the 3 dots appear, pause, appear again. It felt like waiting for a verdict on a thing. "You didn't know you were on trial for," Daniel replied first. "Call a taxi." "I'm watching TV." Before the sting could settle, Claire chimed in. "Stay in the hospital another month. So nice without you here." The monitors didn't change their tune. Ceiling didn't tilt. The earth didn't notice. But the parts of a life you can't measure made a noise only I could hear. I set the phone down. I'm not a man who shouts. I learned how to keep tears for rooms that forgive them. A third bubble popped up. "Rebecca, Dad, I wish I could help, but I'm out of state. I'll call you later." Later, I whispered. It had become our family's favorite date. I adjusted. Myself an inch. The stitches tugged like a warning. "Pain is good," the surgeons say. "It means you're alive in there." So does anger. So does the strange calm that follows a door slamming in your face. I could feel it moving in, setting up its cot. Jasmine came back with pills in a little paper cup and water in a straw cup that made me feel 8. "How are we doing?" she asked, voice all listening. I nodded. "I'll need a taxi tomorrow." She clocked the way. I didn't make a joke out of it. "We can have transport take you if needed," she said. "Hospital 2 home rides? A social worker can arrange it." "I'll manage," I said. Navy men say that even when they shouldn't. "All right." She said, not pushing, "Your lunch will be here in an hour. I can bring it warm for once." Warm sounds like heaven. She winked. It's plastic tray warm, but we'll pretend. Storm puts on its boots, quietly. Mine was tying laces. The day slid by in hospital increments. A visit from a tired surgeon with kind hands. A physical therapist who raised one eyebrow when I stood on the first try. A volunteer with a newspaper and a shall-I smile. I slept between. I dreamed of a lighthouse I couldn't get to because the path was covered in glass. I woke with the shape of the light still on me. At 7:10 p.m., a young man in scrubs wheeled a TV into the room and chuckled at his own joke. "Cable, Mr. H," he said. "Doctor's orders. Something about the Orioles comforting you?" "Not sure they're good for anyone's heart," I said, but I let him set it up. I didn't turn it on. Silence and beep, beep, beep felt more honest than men talking about games. My chest was stapled shut. An orderly named Deshaun poked his head in after 8 to swap out a linen bag. He moved with careful strength, like a person who knows what he could carry and chooses not to show it. "You good, sir?" he asked. "Better than yesterday?" I said. He grinned. "That's the game." He made to go, then paused. "You need a ride tomorrow?" "I do drop sometimes." "Gas money, a good story on the way. Got a kid's soccer at Patterson Park and I pick up gigs where I can. I appreciate it," I said. "I'll call you if the taxi falls through." Nodded. "I'm Deshaun if you call." "Frank," I said, sticking my hand out like we were on a pier with an ocean to organize. He shook it. "See you, Frank." After he left, I picked up the phone again. I scrolled through old photos. A fool's medicine. Daniel at 8, a Batman cape and no front teeth, on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade near the Inner Harbor. At 16, hair dyed green because she wanted to pretend rules were for marshmallows. Maggie leaning over a sink, laughing at something I wish I remembered. I felt the ache pull. My chest made a sound of complaint. The nurse would scold me if she knew I was collecting weight inside that didn't show on a scale. "A plan," I told myself. "You need a plan, not a scheme. A plan is a kindness you owe yourself." I slept badly, but woke better. Morning smelt clean. "You're going home," Jasmine said, smiling like she'd put the sunshine in a bag and smuggled it in just for me. Papers signed. Discharge instructions read. A list of don'ts that would make any man feel like everything he knows is wrong. No lifting, no driving, no reaching back for the seatbelt like your spine is a question mark. Call if you need anything. Jasmine said, touching my arm in a way that almost undid me. "Seriously, don't be a hero." "I retired from hero," I said. She made a face like she knew better. "Heroes always say that." The transport coordinator offered me a hospital shuttle. Pride opened its mouth to decline. Common sense put a hand on its throat. "Oh, take it," I said. At the last minute, the shuttle was diverted for a critical pickup. 20-minute delay, the coordinator apologized. "Or we can call a cab." "Cab is fine," I said. "Just one floor down. I'll meet at curbside. Someone should wheel you." "I'll be okay," I said, and before she could. Fish for a wheelchair. I was moving. Slow, sure, stubborn. The elevator dinged me into a lobby that smelled like cafeteria, lasagna, and consequence. A volunteer offered me a magazine. I smiled and kept moving. Outside, the sky over Baltimore was a washed slate. The curb had its own life. People exhaling relief, people holding in grief, sirens singing their single lonely note as they passed. A taxi pulled up, clean enough to forgive. "Frank?" The driver asked out the window. It was a man in his 50s. With a face that used to laugh more. "That's me." "I'm Lenny," he said. "Take your time." He didn't need to tell me that. Time had become an animal that slept on my chest. I slid in, every inch negotiated. Then a sound cut the air in half. Not a siren, rubber screaming. 2 cars at the light on Orleans did a dance they hadn't rehearsed. The smaller one spun and bumped the median. It was a bad bounce, not a cinematic crash. But sometimes it doesn't take fire for lives to change. The driver's door opened. A boy climbed out, 20, maybe pale with that look you get when you've met reality head-on, and forgotten its name. The passenger door didn't open. "Stay put," Lenny said, already out of the car. He moved faster than fear. "Don't you dare," my new sternum said. Shut up, I told it. Ow. Toad, the passenger, was a woman about my daughter's age, eyes closed, head turned at a bad angle. Ma'am, I said, because respect is reflex. Can you hear me? A nurse in blue scrubs came running from the curb she'd been, waiting for a bus. I'm Nia, she said, pulling a hair tie from her wrist, with the kind of efficiency that calms people who don't have it. It's the spine, don't move her. Copy, I said. Not sure if I was talking to her or my bones, she's breathing. Nia said, fingers at the throat, like a grace. Call 911. Lenny was already shouting the intersection into his phone. Ambulance, someone said. The hospital doors were 20 yards away. You'd think a journey that short could be made on willpower. You'd be wrong. Hey, I said softly to the woman. You're okay? You'll be okay? People lie for good reasons sometimes. Her eyes fluttered. One opened, hazel gone glassy. Mom, she whispered. Not your mom, I said, but close enough for now. She laughed and winced. Hurts, she said. I know. My chest agreed. Help's here. It was a team rolled out like a chapter heading. One of them, a woman with a braid and a command voice, took over. I'm paramedic Ortiz, she said. What do we have? Dia gave the details like a quarterback, all facts. No fear. They collared the woman, checked the vitals, moved like they'd done it 1,000 times because they had. I stepped back. My heart pounded to a rhythm my surgeon would scold. You're pale? Nia said to me without looking. I didn't. Sit. I leaned on the taxi like a man who knows what a rib is for. The young driver of the car that hit them stood there with tears he pretended were weather. It was yellow, he said to no one and everyone. It was yellow. It's okay. Kid, I said, you're here. You called. That counts. The woman in the car stared at me. You look like somebody's dad, she said. A little high on adrenaline and gratitude. I am, I said, the weight I hadn't felt like I had permission to own in a while. The world reassembled itself into its parts. Sirens faded. The crowd's breath unheld. Nia squeezed my arm. Shh. You did good, she said. I didn't do anything. You came, she said. That's not nothing. Lenny helped me back into the taxi like he was transferring a relic. We drove. Baltimore slid by row houses like a song, someone yelling 3 blocks over about a price they couldn't pay. A mural that made an alley into a cathedral. My son texts like a man, Lenny said after a block, apropos of nothing. Acts like a boy. I asked mine for a ride, I said, surprising myself. He told me to call a taxi. His wife suggested I stay in the hospital because it's nice without me. Lenny made a noise that sounded like a tire losing air. That's it is, I said. You got people? He asked. I do, I said, thinking of Rebecca, of Jasmine, of a woman in blue scrubs who moved like a storm, had taught her how. They're not where I thought they'd be. We turned onto my block in Fells Point, cobblestones that had ruined more than one suspension. The house I'd built my years into looked the same and not at all. Claire had put big white planters. On the steps, hydrangeas like polite golf claps, a wreath that said welcome in a font that made my teeth itch. You want me to walk you up? Lenny asked. I'll manage, I said, and meant it and didn't. Take care, Mr. Frank. We. Too, Lenny. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house. My keys felt heavier than they should. The door opened before I could use them. Claire stood there in a sweater that probably came with a rule book, she said, like I was a neighbor delivering a flyer about a lost cat. You're back. Doctor said so, I said. She moved. Aside, don't touch the banister. I just oiled it. Wouldn't dream of it, I said. One hand on my chest as if to keep my insides in. The house smelled like lemon and nothing. My chair was gone. In its place, a glossy side table held a stack of magazines whose covers seemed to shout about lives that had room for conversation. My photographs were replaced by candles named things like Calm and Haven and Promise. My own promises echoed. Back at me from a place that had rearranged itself in my absence. Daniel's in the den, Claire said, gesturing without looking as if pointing to a man she might order off the menu. He's watching the Orioles. Course he is, I said. In the den, Daniel hunched in the blue light of television, his eyes glued to a game that would let him forget he'd become someone he wouldn't recognize at 8. He didn't look. Up until a commercial for car insurance made him realize we were all mortal. He pressed pause like he was doing me a favor. "Hey," he said. No smile. No bent knees, ready to stand up and meet me where I was. "Hey," I said. "You good?" He asked the question like he was asking about a package left on the stoop. "Doctor says I shouldn't lift anything heavier than a paperback," I said. "So no opening your heart." He smirked in a way that used to be charming. "You're welcome for the advice yesterday." "I'll send a thank you note," I said. Claire hovered in the doorway, not close enough to listen, close enough to interrupt. "Dinner is lasagna," she said, "from Fresh Market. Mind the counter, not a scratches. I'll eat in my room." I said, "It's our guest room now," she said, "too fast." I nodded slowly. A man learning a foreign language one insult at a time. Daniel turned up the volume and unpaused the game. "We'll talk later," he said, eyes already back on the screen. "No," I said, in a voice that surprised us all. "We'll talk when you're capable of it. That might be never." I took the stairs one at a time. The room that used to be mine had been redecorated into a hotel no one wanted to stay in. The bed was too pretty to sit on. The nightstand had a book I'd never read. The closet held my clothes in a tidy arrangement that made me feel like an exhibit. I lay down, every movement negotiated, and stared at a ceiling that had once heard me say I do. At 6:58 p.m., Claire knocked. "News is on," she said, voice bright. "They're doing a feel-good story from Hopkins." "I'll pass," I said. "You always liked those," she said, and then, when I didn't answer, "Suit yourself." I didn't intend to watch. The Orioles called Daniel louder than the local anchors ever could, but the sound drifted up through vents older than all of us. "Tonight on WBAL," a woman's voice said, "a bystander assist outside Hopkins becomes a reminder of the best in us." I closed my eyes. The best in us. Sometimes the best in us is just showing up at the curb. A half hour later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. And again. When it hit the 5th time, my Navy training made me answer out of sheer stubborn etiquette. "Frank Harland," a quick voice said. "This is Hannah Cho with WBAL. We'd like to talk to you about what happened outside the hospital today." "I didn't do anything," I said. "That's the best kind of story," she said. "Can we send a crew by?" 5 minutes. 10 tops. "I'm not. It's human," she said, and something about her tone told me she meant it. 10 minutes later, a camera stood in my front yard like a visitor from a planet that wanted to understand how we manage. I sat on the bottom step because my chest didn't negotiate higher. Hannah crouched in front of me instead of making me crane my neck. Her producer held a light that warmed my face without asking me to perform. "Tell me what happened," she said. "I was leaving after surgery," I said. "There was a fender bender. A young nurse was there. She did all the work, said some words. I told the girl she wasn't alone. That's it." "Why did you come over?" Hannah asked. "Because I could," I said. "Because people deserve a voice to tell them they're still here. I've known too many men who needed that and didn't get it." "And how are you?" She asked a question she could have faked but didn't. "I'm breathing," I said. "That's the job, your family taking good care of you?" she asked. It was the kind of question that lives in the script. She didn't know she'd tossed a match. I smiled. Small. "My family is complicated," I said. "But Baltimore's been kinder than I expected." She nodded, like she could read what was not said, and didn't push. We wrapped. She thanked me like I'd done her a favor. We shook hands. The camera folded into the car like a circus trick. The house went back to itself. I didn't think about it until later when the news came on downstairs. I recognized my own voice and felt foolishly embarrassed by it, as if I had chewed too loudly in public. Daniel's TV volume went up. Claire's O floated up the stairwell like a balloon, and then the phone began. First unknown numbers, friends of friends, parishioners at St. David's, a neighbor who had never spoken to me even when we shared a trash can, then familiar ones. Daniel, Claire. Daniel again. FaceTime as if my face would forgive them faster than my ears. They called me 67 times in 2 hours. I didn't pick up once. Text bubbles filled the screen. Daniel, we saw you on TV. Why didn't you tell us? Claire, you made us look cruel. My mother watches WBAL. Daniel, call me. Daniel, Dad. Daniel, answer your phone. Claire, we need to control the narrative. People will think I set the phone face down and listen to my heartbeat settle itself into a rhythm that belonged to me again. At 10:03 p.m., a different message came in from a number I didn't know. A voice note. I pressed play. Mr. Harland. A woman said, careful and kind. This is Sandra Pike. I'm an elder law attorney. Hana Cho forwarded me your number with your permission. If you need help with your housing situation or just want to know what your options are, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Free. No strings. I'm not selling you anything. This is Baltimore. We take care of our own. I stared at the ceiling. The stitches in my chest pulling just enough to remind me I wasn't out of the woods, but I'd found a trail. Options is a word I like. It smells like open windows. Downstairs. The TV still murmured the same 2 stories, one about a man who made something out of nothing, one about a team trying to make nothing out of something. The volume went down. Feet padded up the stairs. A knock on my door. Daniel's voice, small and theatrical. Dad. I'm resting, I said. Can we talk? His tone held a new thing, fear, or performance. Hard to tell from the hallway. Tomorrow, I said. When I'm stronger? Silence. Then a sigh. Then the soft retreat of a man who will be more angry in the morning than he was that night, because he couldn't control the shape of the story. Texted Rebecca. You see the news? She replied instantly. Of course I did. Proud of you. I'm calling you in the morning. Love you. I fell asleep. The kind free of the light in the dream I couldn't get to, holding the edges of a plan that wasn't revenge. It was something better. A boundary with a map. Tomorrow. I call Sandra Pike. Tomorrow I'd call back Deshawn and Lenny and Hannah and every person who had shown up at the curb when I needed a sign that the world hadn't forgotten the shape of me. Tomorrow, I'd ask about the life estate in my deed and what it meant. Legally, for doors and keys and the word home. Tonight, I rested. Not as a man waiting for permission. As a man who had already decided. Asterisk morning came like a negotiator. Calm, firm, unwilling to leave without an agreement. I woke to a house that looked like mine and felt like a showroom I hadn't been invited. 2, downstairs, a coffee maker hissed. I could smell Cinnamon Claire's idea of hospitality, store-bought and slightly performative. Out. My chest ached, but the ache had become a companion rather than a threat. I breathed around it. My phone blinked. With the residue of last night, 67 missed calls. A handful of texts that mistook reputation for repentance. I ignored them all and tapped Sandra Pike's number instead. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Harland, Sandra? Frank, I said. And thank you for calling. I'm glad you picked up. I watched the segment, she said. My husband cried. Don't tell him I told you. I laughed in spite of myself. Your secret's safe with me. Here's what I need to know, she said, switching into the voice of a woman who does not waste a syllable. You mentioned you reserved a life estate when you deeded your home to your son. Do you have a copy of the deed in the safe? I said. Great, I'll come by at noon. We'll review your rights, put paper under your boundaries, and outline options. Notice, wrongful detainer if needed. And if you want new estate documents so the shape of your life is in your handwriting, not someone else's. Wrongful detainer? I asked. Maryland's process for removing someone who's in your property without a right to be there. No lease, no tenancy, no consent or consent you're now revoking. For you, as a life tenant, you have the right to exclusive possession. If they're in the home at your pleasure, you can end that pleasure. Legally. I let the word legally soak into the scars pride had left. Noon, she confirmed. And Frank, today isn't revenge. Today is alignment. After I hung up, I called the hospital's social work office. A woman named Katrina picked up with the quiet cheer of someone who saves strangers. Lives with clipboards and phone trees. I'm home, I told her, and I'll need help, just for a bit. Meals, maybe? A visiting nurse, she made it easy, of course. We'll set you up with home health nursing and PT for 2 weeks, Meals on Wheels and Maryland Access Point. For aging services. Do you have someone for rides to follow-ups? I've got a taxi driver named Lenny who might just be an angel, I said. A guy named Deshaun who collects good stories as tips. She chuckled. Better than Lyft? I'll email you. Your schedule. I brewed tea because coffee felt like electricity and I didn't have the wiring for it. I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the small square of yard that remembered me even when the house had been trained not to. A robin hopped onto the fence and stared like it knew the next line. Me too, I told it. At 11:46, Rebecca called from Portland, breathless. I booked a flight, she announced without hello. Tomorrow morning into BWI. I'll be there by 3. You don't have to, I know, she said. I want to. Also, I'm wildly proud of you. And slightly angry at my brother, and I think I should do my anger in person. I smiled. I'll save you a chair on the porch. Good, she said, her voice softening. How's your chest? Stubborn, I said, like the rest of me. Then it's healing, she said. I love you. Love you too. At noon on the dot, the doorbell chimed. I opened. It to a woman in her 40s with close-cropped hair, sensible shoes, a leather portfolio, and the steady regard of someone who has walked into many rooms where a person's life was a pile and left them as shelves. I'm Sandra, she said, stepping in. We'll do this at the table. We sat. She took out a yellow pad and a pen that clicked with purpose. I fetched the safe box from the closet, my hands shook less than I'd expected, and set the deed on the wood like a confession. She scanned. There it is, she said, tapping the paragraph. You reserved a life estate with full rights of possession, exclusive occupancy, and right to lease. Daniel is the remainder man. He takes title when you pass. Till then, this house is yours. To control, not his. I exhaled, a sound half laugh, half relief, so I can ask them to leave. You can tell them to leave, she corrected gently. But do it properly. Today we'll draft a notice to terminate license to occupy 30 days as customary and looks good in court. We'll send it certified mail, post it on the door, and email it so nobody claims they missed it. If they refuse, we file a wrongful detainer in district court. The sheriff handles the rest. Sounds clinical, I said, remembering birthday. Cakes and Batman capes. It's mercy with a spine, she said. One more thing. We clean up your estate plan? Revocable trust, pour-over will, durable powers of attorney, healthcare directive. Who do you trust to speak if you can't? Rebecca, I said without thinking. Good, she said. We'll make it so. She drafted with the efficiency of a woman who has turned chaos into stationery enough times to qualify as clergy. At 1:10 p.m., the door opened and Claire breezed in with a shopping bag and an expression she wore for shopkeepers and small-town mayors. She stopped when she saw Sandra, recalculated, regrouped. This is my lawyer, I said before she could. Deploy a tone? We're working, lawyer, Claire repeated, trying to put a laugh under it and failing. For what? Sandra didn't bother to smile. For boundaries, she said. We'll be out of your kitchen in a bit. Claire tightened her lips. This is our kitchen. Sandra met her gaze. Not for long. Claire's eyes flashed, then softened into something smoother. Frank, she said, tilting her head. We were going to have a little get-together tonight, to celebrate you being home. Daniel invited a few friends. Your segment was such a nice surprise. Celebration, I said. After you suggested the hospital keep me because it was so nice without me. Claire flushed the color of bad wine. That was a joke, she said quickly. You know me. I'm sarcastic. I do know you, I said evenly. And I don't need a party. I need my house back. She blinked. Back. Sandra slid a letter across the table with a deliberate kindness. Miss Harland, Mr. Harland is revoking your license to occupy. You and Daniel have 30 days to vacate. If you don't, we file We'd like to avoid that. Claire stared at the letter like it had insulted her shoes. Be serious. I am, I said. I was serious when I signed the deed with a life estate so you'd have a future here. I was serious when I asked for a ride after surgery. I'm serious now. She put a hand to her chest as if the script required it. Daniel will be furious. He already is, I said. About many things that aren't my fault. Claire backed out of the kitchen the way people do when they encounter a hurricane they hadn't forecast. We'll talk tonight, she managed. No, I said, and surprised even myself. We'll talk at noon on Saturday, in this room. With Sandra present, we'll keep it brief and factual, and kind, if you'll let it be. She swallowed. Saturday, she said, and left. Sandra sat back and let the air settle. Piece of advice, she said. When people show you they love optics, they will try to make an exit into a scene. Keep the door boring. I can do boring, I said. I was Navy. She grinned. Then you'll be fine. We finished the papers, signed in the places. That mattered. Sandra slid a copy of everything into a blue folder labeled with my name. This is the part where your life gets quieter, she said. Till then, brace for noise. Right. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like a room after a storm when you can hear the refrigerator. I poured tea, I didn't. Remember making and took it to the porch. The chair I loved was gone, replaced by something that looked like a catalog's idea of a life. I sat anyway. The street held its usual chorus bus breaks, laughter, a neighbor telling a dog that commerce is not permitted in the flower bed. Please. Mrs. Alvarez from 2 doors down walked by with a foil-covered dish cradled like a newborn. I saw you on the news, she said, stopping at the steps. You looked handsome and kind. I was mostly confused, I said. That too, she said, smiling. I made arroz con palo. My mother always said chicken helps everything, especially men with stitches. She glanced at my chest without staring. Can I put it in your fridge? Please, I said, gratitude making my throat tight. In the kitchen? She set the dish down, then touched my elbow. Wynn's boys are not kind, she said softly. They love him when they need him. Otherwise, he sees the back of their heads. If you want someone to sit on the porch and make sure no one says anything stupid to you, I'm your woman. I laughed. Saturday. At noon? It's a date, she said, and patted my hand like a grandmother who could also win a bar. Fight. That evening, I didn't go downstairs for Claire's party because there wasn't one. The letter had canceled her appetite for optics. Daniel didn't knock on my door. He moved through the house like a man packing anger into boxes you can only open in front of people who will clap. I watched the game upstairs on my own TV, volume low. Less for the Orioles and more for the habit of letting other people narrate. My life for a few hours. At 9:12 p.m., a text came in from an unknown number. A photo, the young woman from the curb, propped up in a hospital bed with a lopsided smile and a collar around her neck that made her look like courage had gotten formal. Hi, the message said. It's Tori the passenger in the crash. The nurse gave me your number. Thank you for staying. My mom says she owes you a pie. What kind? Any? I typed back. Except razzleberry, no man knows what that is. She sent back 5 laughing emojis and a heart. I saved her number under Tori Alive. I slept without dreams for the first time in weeks. Saturday arrived with a clean sky and the promise of a civilized fight. Mrs. Alvarez settled herself on the porch at 11:45 a.m., knitting needles clicking like a metronome. I'm Switzerland, she said, but louder. Sandra arrived early, spread her papers like a picnic, and placed a slim recorder on the table. For accuracy, she said. And because people hear themselves differently on playback. Noon, Daniel and Claire came in together, shoulders lined up in a posture that said team. Daniel's jaw was tight. His eyes were ringed with the dark circles of a man who had been up late trying to punish a television by staring at it. Dad, he said, trying on different tones until he found one that fit. This is extreme, it's clear, I said. We've been unclear for years. Out. Claire sat down and pressed her lips into a line. Daniel didn't sit. He paced. He always paced when he needed the room to move so the blame wouldn't stick to him. I signed the deed, I began. I kept a life estate. That means the house is mine to live in until I die. You inherit after. I've let you live here as my guests. I'm ending that now. Why? Daniel asked, even though he knew. I looked at him like the boy I'd carried. Through a pharmacy at midnight because he needed medicine, because you refused me a ride home after heart surgery and your wife told me to stay gone. Because this house is the only place your mother laughed in every room, and I won't let that laugh be mocked by scented candles and cruelty, because I am not a burden in my own home. His eyes flicked to Sandra. Can't kick your own son out. I can, I said, and I am. Claire inhaled sharply. We'll contest. You can try, Sandra said, her tone purely informational. But his rights are clear. We'll remain past the notice period. We'll file a wrongful detainer. And the sheriff will remove you. You'll have a record. It helps no one. Daniel leaned on the back of a chair as if weight might make an argument. You'll be alone here, he said, as if the word alone were a curse. I won't. I said, I have my daughter, I have neighbors. I have nurses and taxi drivers and a woman who knits like she's scoring a movie. I have a lawyer, and I'll have quiet. That's not nothing. He laughed without humor. Hey, this is because you were on TV, he said, as if the camera had turned a simple man greedy for narrative. You liked how it felt. I liked being useful, I said. It's new in this house. He took a breath that sounded like an engine refusing to turn. Fine. He said, We'll go, but people will talk. Let them, I said. Tell the truth, and the talking is their problem. Claire stood, adjusting her sweater as if that could tidy the day. We'll be out in 3 weeks, she said. I'll leave the hydrangeas. Take them, I said. They never liked me. Sandra handed them each a packet. This includes the notice, the date, and my contact information. If you want to negotiate a small severance to help with moving costs, my client is open to that in exchange for a waiver and keys on time. Daniel had the decency to look surprised. You'd pay us to leave? I'd pay for peace. I said, it's cheaper than court? He stared at me, the math of pride and practicality visible on his face. Well, think about it, he said, Sandra said, and deliver your decision in writing. They left. Mrs. Alvarez exhaled. A syllable in Spanish that meant both amen and finally. Sandra clicked off the recorder and slid it into her bag. It's not bad, she said. It'll still be bumpy. But you did that without rage. I learned from my mother, I said. She could fillet a man with a sentence and leave him thanking her for the lesson. Sandra laughed. I'd have liked her, you would, I said. She would have asked you about your shoes. The week after the meeting was a small parade of mercy. Home health came Nurse Alina, with a voice like a lullaby and hands that could read a stitch from 6 feet away. She changed my dressings and told me jokes I wrote down for later. Physical therapist Mason had a stopwatch and a grin that dared me to try without making me feel sick. Meals arrived at 11:30, little containers that smelled like they were trying to keep me alive, even if my appetite couldn't be bothered. Hannah, Cho called to ask if I'd be willing to do a follow-up. Not for views, she insisted, for volume. Her newsroom wanted to launch a ride program for hospital discharges who had nobody to call. She'd found a nonprofit willing to funnel donations through a fiscal sponsor. They needed a face. You're not photogenic, she said kindly. You're trustworthy. I'll take trustworthy, I said. Photogenic is for fruit. We met at the hospital, this time on purpose. Deshawn was there in his off-hours uniform, a neat polo, and the expression of a man who knows what it means to show up on time. Lenny came in his cab, which he'd vacuumed like a man preparing for inspection. Jasmine slipped into the background on her way to her shift and squeezed my shoulder. Paramedic Ortiz nodded to me from across the lobby with the small salute of a soldier who has saved more lives than he remembers. We filmed a segment that didn't make me feel like a prop. It made me feel like the point. They called it Homecoming Baltimore Rides. Door to door, no questions asked, a small stipend for drivers, gas cards, and a warm hand on a cold day. The anchor read the tagline without irony, because no one should recover alone at the curb. On launch day, donations blew past the modest goal in hours. Dozens of people signed up to drive. Somebody sent $100 in memory of a mother who would have insisted. Someone else sent $5 with a note, "It's what I have. Had to borrow for my surgery." Keep someone from borrowing their dignity. Daniel texted to ask if he could give to the fund for optics. I didn't reply. That afternoon, a woman from Adult Protective Services knocked on my door. Her card read, Sharon Hawks, LCSWC. She had kind eyes and a notebook that had seen things. We got a call, she said, not saying who. May I come in? Of course, I said, stepping aside. Do you want tea? I have mint. She looked startled. I'd love tea, she said, and we sat at the table as if it were a visit and not an evaluation. She asked questions gently and listened hard. Any financial exploitation? She asked. Not anymore, I said. We're cleaning. That up? Any threats? She asked. Words, I said. Not fists. Words can bruise, she said. I know, I said, but I've learned new words. Like no. She smiled. That's a strong one. She closed her notebook. I'm not worried about you, she said. You've built a team. That's half the job. Call me if the noise gets loud. When she left, I stood at the sink and cried into a tea towel, because sometimes being believed is heavier than being doubted. 3 days before their deadline, Daniel rang the bell, alone. No swagger. Can we talk? He asked. On the porch, I said where the air can correct us. We sat on chairs that had belonged to my father and had spent a decade in the garage waiting for me to remember I liked them. He looked at his hands. He had my knuckles. I was a jerk, he said. I waited. I panicked. He tried. I shouldn't have said the thing about the taxi. It was flippant. Cruel, I corrected. Say cruel. He swallowed. Cruel, he repeated. And the nice without you from Claire, I asked. He flinched. She was joking. She wasn't, I said. But even if she were, it's the kind of joke that rots. He rubbed his eyes. He looked older than 35. He looked younger than 8. I'm sorry, he said finally, and it sounded almost like a real thing. I hope so, I said. But my boundary stands. You need to go. We can try again. When the air between us is clean? He nodded, shoulders caving, then squared. We'll take the severance, he said. It'll help with the deposit. We'll be gone by Friday. Keys, I said. Mail forwarded. Leave the garage key on the hook, not on the counter. He looked up, surprised. Why? Because your mother used to leave me notes on that. Hook, I said. I'd like the last thing hanging from it not to be a fight. He nodded. He stood. He hesitated, Dad. Yes. Am I a bad son? He asked. So quietly I almost didn't hear it. No, I said. It's been a careless one. It's fixable. He took a breath and held it like a boy underwater. Okay, he said, and exhaled. Okay. They left on Friday at 4:12 p.m. The house exhaled with them. I walked through after, slowly, like a man paying respect to a church that had hosted. A service not everyone survived. Their things were gone. The house looked less staged and more empty. I put my palm on the mantel and felt the wood warm under my skin. We're back, I told Maggie. You can laugh again. So the first thing I did wasn't big. It wasn't cinematic. I put my wedding photo back on the mantel in a picture. Of the kids at 7 and 9, all teeth and chaos, next to it. Then I made a pot of beans because I wanted the house to remember how to smell like home. That night, Rebecca landed. I drove to BWI because my surgeon said I could if the seatbelt didn't cross my incision, and because Lenny had insisted on following behind me like a guardian angel in a taxi. Rebecca walked down the ramp with a backpack and a set of shoulders I recognized as mine. She saw me and ran the last 10 feet like a girl who hadn't forgotten how. She typed a sentence into my back while she hugged me. I'm angry on your behalf, she wrote with her hands. And so proud I could float. We drove back to the city with the windows down and the radio on a station that played songs from when Maggie danced while she cooked. Rebecca told me about pines and rain and coffee with foam shaped like leaves that made her feel like a tourist in her own life. I told her about Sandra and Mrs. Alvarez and the room where paper makes people behave. At home, she stood in the doorway and inhaled. Smells right, she said. I made beans, I said. You always make beans when life requires patience, she said, and kissed my cheek. We ate at the table like a family. Rebecca washed dishes. I dried. We didn't talk. About Daniel, because love for one child and boundaries for another can live in the same room if you've set places for both. After we sat on the porch, the neighborhood fell into its nightly rhythm, dogs negotiating, teenagers laughing at jokes their parents would not find funny. A siren to neighborhoods over singing a minor key. Mrs. Alvarez waved from her stoop. "You okay?" she called. "We are," Rebecca answered for both of us. "Good," Mrs. Alvarez said. I was about to come over with a ladle like a weapon. Rebecca snorted and leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'll stay a week," she said. "We'll get your papers signed, fix the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom, and figure out what you want to do with the front room. I'm thinking bookshelves." "Bookshelves," I repeated, and felt something old and good reassemble itself in my chest. Homecoming Baltimore took off like a bird that had been practicing in secret. In the first month, they gave 146 rides. A woman named Bernice sent a handwritten note. "I am 82. I do not drive. My son is in Florida." The driver held my elbow and did not make me feel old. He made me feel human. "Thank you." Named Troy, discharged after detox. Asked the driver to wait while he threw away the numbers in his phone that would have dragged him back. The driver did. A pediatric nurse started keeping a stack of homecoming cards in her pocket. "For the parents who don't want to ask," she told Hannah, so they don't have to. Hannah did a follow-up segment with stories and no numbers. She didn't show my house. She showed Lenny's cab and Deshaun's smile and the hands of a city that remembers once in a while. How to be a small town. Tori sent the promised pie cherry, oozing just enough to prove a human made it. On top of the box, a note. "You looked like somebody's dad when I needed one. Thank you." "Tori and Mom?" I cried into a fork and decided there are worse ways to hydrate. Sandra brought the trust documents. We sat with Rebecca at the table and signed tabs the color of hard candy. Rebecca cried when she saw her name. "Not because of the house," she said, "because of the trust." "It goes both ways," I said. We recorded a new deed, Frank Harland, life tenant to the Harland Revocable Trust, with Rebecca as successor trustee. Sandra explained what it meant. I listened and thought about how many people spend their lives letting the future be something that happens to them instead of something they steer toward. When it was done, Sandra put her pen down and smiled. "How's your heart?" she asked, and I knew she meant both kinds. "Stronger," I said, "and pickier." She laughed. "Good, picky hearts live longer." As one afternoon, when the sky had nothing better to do than be blue, I sat on the porch and measured my breath in 4 counts the way the physical therapist had taught me. A boy on a skateboard skittered past, hair in his eyes, youth in his pockets. He hit a crack, flailed, didn't fall, grinned at me like he'd just invented balance. "Nice save," I said. He saluted me with 2 fingers and kept going. Daniel texted a photo of an apartment. Bland, beige, sufficient. "We're in," he wrote. "Keys turned in at noon."
"Thanks for the help."
"You're welcome," I wrote back. "Do better." A bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then, trying. "Good," I wrote. It was a small word. Was a big thing to admit. We left it there. That night, Rebecca and I brought my chair back into the living room. We set it by the window, where the light sits late and kind. We hung a shelf. We placed the picture of Maggie laughing in the kitchen so she could see the room she'd taught to be alive. We lit a candle that smelled like oranges, not serenity. Rebecca slid a book into the shelf like a first brick. "Welcome back," she said to the house. "Thank you," the house said back. "If you know how to listen." The call came on a Thursday. The Orioles invited homecoming. Baltimore to throw out the first pitch on cardiac night. Jasmine would catch. Deshaun would stand on the chalk to my left. Lenny would hold his cap in his hands like a promise. Hannah would film for the station. The stadium would smell like grass and peanuts and the kind of hope that makes strangers high-five. "Are you up for it?" Rebecca asked, teasing and protective at once. "I can throw 12 feet without spraining my dignity," I said. "I'll aim for 11. When I stood on the mound with a scar that had learned to be quiet in a city that had learned to be kind, I thought of the curb, of a voice asking who can pick me up, into a phone that glowed cold. I thought of a nurse on a bus stop in blue scrubs, of a paramedic with a braid and a command voice, of a taxi driver who pauses when it matters, and a man who does linen drops and saves days in between. I thought of a son who had been cruel and might yet be kind. I thought of a daughter who looked at me like a lighthouse and insisted I was one. I thought of a woman on a porch, 2 doors down, knitting a peace treaty between rage and restraint. Through the ball, it arced honest and a little left. Jasmine moved her glove and made me look better than I was. The crowd clapped. It sounded like forgiveness on a summer night. A year later, the scar on my chest is pale as chalk and twice as honest. The house smells like beans and orange peel again. Porch to old wooden chairs, and a little table Maggie rescued from a yard sale has become our commons. Mrs. Alvarez still knits guard duty 2 doors down. People wave more. Some of them even sit. Homecoming Baltimore turned into a habit the city kept. We never chased big numbers, but the little ones added up anyway. 1,902 rides the first year. 5 hospitals referring 30 volunteer drivers on rotation. Gas cards donated by a church that remembered what casseroles are for. Lenny runs dispatch on Tuesdays from the front seat of his cab. Deshaun trains new drivers to wait that extra minute so dignity can catch up. Paramedic Ortiz sends us notes when we cross paths in the wild. Your guy was there before we were. Gold star. Tori alive is more alive than ever. The caller came off by Thanksgiving. She and her mom brought a peach pie and made me eat 2 slices for science. In January, she started EMT classes. I want to be the person who runs toward it, she said, and when I told Ortiz, she smiled in that quiet way people do when a circle closes. And Daniel. Redemption rarely arrives with trumpets. It came to my son like rain, steady, slow, sometimes. Late, he and Claire didn't last. I didn't celebrate it, just kept the porch light on. He started therapy because a coworker said, "Man, you're angry at the ceiling." He picked up Sunday shifts with homecoming Baltimore ride-alongs at first, then solo. Then the kind where he waits on the curb after a discharge and carries the bag that weighs more than it looks. We had the conversation on a night the sky couldn't decide between drizzle and commitment. He stood on the porch holding a sack of grocery store flowers that had tried hard and a 6-pack of ginger ale. We sat. I was cruel, he said, without hedging, not flippant, not stressed. Cruel, yes, I said. I don't expect. You too forget, he added. I'm just asking you to believe me when I say I'm different than that day. I looked at the man with my knuckles and the boy I'd carried through a midnight pharmacy to stop a fever. I reached across the small table and put my hand over his. I've got you, son. I said the sentence I'd been saving since that first night with broth and a cool cloth. His mouth shook, nodded like a vow. I've got you too, Dad. Didn't move back in. Boundaries stayed where Sandra drew them and where I learned to love them. But he came every Thursday for dinner. He replaced the upstairs faucet without YouTube, fixed the sticky window in the den, and didn't make a speech about it. He drove a homecoming run every month. He sent me a picture from a dark curb in front of Mercy Hospital, a hand on an old man's elbow, the other hand carrying a paper bag with pill bottles rattling like dice. He's in the tech set, lights on, all good. Rebecca finished. Her first year back at school, with grades that looked like someone who'd found her lane and refused to be honked at. She handles the foundation books, bullies me into rest, and installed bookshelves in the front room that make a library out of what used to be space. We put a small plaque above the porch bell. No one recovers alone at the curb. There was no court. In the end, the notice stood. The keys landed on the right hook. Sandra filed the trust in the powers and smiled that particular smile lawyers get when paper has prevented war. I wrote a letter of wishes, the kind that tells your kids the why, not just the what. It starts, choose kindness with spine. Group chat that once broke me is quieter now. When a cousin wrote, who can pick up Aunt Marie from Hopkins? The answers stacked up like chairs after a good party. I typed one too. I'm on my way. Daniel beat me to it by 3 minutes and sent a selfie from the curb his arm around Aunt Marie. Both of them grinning like people who have nothing to prove and plenty to offer. Hannah did a 1-year peace no doorstep ambush. Just a bench. In Patterson Park, we didn't talk about my family. We talked about the way a city can learn a new reflex. She ended with this. Sometimes the story isn't who failed you, but who showed up anyway.
What?
On Maggie's birthday, Rebecca and I ate lemon cake on the steps and told one good thing about her for each candle she would have had. She would love this porch, Rebecca said. She'd run the whole block from it, I said. We laughed until our eyes needed wiping. A week later, Daniel and I watched an Orioles game in the den with the volume low. In the 8th, a kid in a Batman cape ran through the aisle on the broadcast, parents pretending not to chase so his joy would last longer. Daniel elbowed me, grinning. That was me, he said. I know, I said. When the game ended, the quiet between us felt like a room we'd finally put furniture in. He stood, took the empty bottles to the sink without being asked, and paused at the mantel. He touched Maggie's picture as if to check a pulse. Good night, Mom, he whispered. He didn't know I heard. I didn't tell him. If you're where? I was staring at a phone, heart stitched and blinds drawn. Here's what I learned when the curb became a classroom. You can put paper under your boundaries. You can build a porch and call it policy. You can turn a single ride into a habit a city keeps. You can love your children and still lock the front door. You can say, I've got you, and mean it without losing yourself. And once in a while, if you're lucky, they'll say it back. It turns out, the opposite of being left at the curb isn't a parade. It's a chair, a light left on, and someone honest enough to come when you call.